The people who work in the V&A are surrounded by some of the most magnificent things that have ever been made, and they're a more surly, disputatious bunch of individuals you simply couldn't find. Anyway, but the matter of whether we want to teach the Facebook generation to make art is, I think, something rather different. There's a very, very interesting theory that the actual act of drawing helps the creative process. I met it's actually not just a description, it's actually, there's something to do with the way the architecture of the brain, which the drawing helps ideas follow one another. I met a landscape architect the other day who said he was absolutely convinced that teaching people to draw could help improve their golf. I'm serious. And I think, equally, since it's a tennis moment, since tennis and football are such spatial games, indeed, the Facebook generation's performance on pitch and court might indeed be enhanced by lessons in draftsmanship. But, lessons in draftsmanship, when I was thinking about what I was going to say tonight, I came entirely by accident across a fabulously odd passage written by a purplish Victorian novelist called Maria-Louise Ramée, who's known as Ouida. And she said this: "Apart from the gross folly of teaching a child anything for which its own natural talent does not predispose it, and the injury done to the world by the artificial manufacture of millions of indifferent draftsmen, what use can it be to awaken perception in a generation which is begotten where art and nature are alike persistently outraged? It is entirely useless to multiply art schools." I actually don't agree, of course, but I think it's an interesting point of view. But anyway, still, this is not the same as the actual business of this question of the debate tonight, the discussion tonight, of what it means to teach art. Teaching art suggests to me a very archaic set of values. Teaching art was what the old academies did. They didn't do it to the Facebook generation. They did it, of course, to the Gutenberg generation. And these academies were something which flourished throughout Europe in the pre-industrial age. Between 1720 and 1740, academies were opened from Toulouse to St. Petersburg and everywhere in between. By the end of the 18th century, there were 100 academies teaching art, how to draw, how to paint, to the Gutenberg generation. And what they actually taught, let's remember, was a set of stultifying rituals based on the classical ideal. Our own industrial age, which followed that, had an altogether different set of values. And very interesting, in the 19th century, early 19th century, German pedagogues, including Froebel, the man who invented the blocks, and Pestalozzi, and the kindergarten founders, the rest of it, they too taught that the act of drawing could have some sort of transcendent quality. The Germans developed these interesting ideas in Anschauung and Hauptformen, perception and the key visual plastic commodities which an object might have. They taught these. Drawing, they said, was the soul of painting, but it was also the essence, absolute essence of understanding something. And it was these insights from these 19th century pedagogues which went to found, which influenced the whole creation of the philosophy and the aesthetics of the Bauhaus, which, of course, in a sense was the ultimate expression of the academies which were founded in the 1720s. But what the Bauhaus taught was that art and technology are not separate from design and craft, that they're all, in fact, the same thing. The Bauhaus, the last academy, taught that art was not the business of epicene and ultramontane academics, but was everybody's concern. Art, in the 20th century, left the ateliers and the studios and the garrets and went out into the factories and the streets. Now, we're all living with that, which brings us exactly now to the Facebook generation. Google is now collective memory. Google, whatever you think of it, now represents exactly what classical learning once did. An Apple Studio display, your big thing which sits on your desk, that's become the new artist's studio. Now, I think this is actually marvellous, but I detect in the phrasing of the question and in some of what my predecessors said up here, I detect a sort of hint of intellectual snobbery in the actual phrasing of the question. Cannot be taught to the Facebook generation. There seems to be a suggestion that the Facebook generation is actually deficient in some respect. And the suggestion is that it's an infantilized generation deluded by a false celebration of choice, where all new media, with their DVD, games, social networks like Facebook, just offer a technologically sophisticated delivery of stupidity. I actually don't agree at all. I think new media always create their own languages and their own disciplines. The despised video games, what they actually represent is a sort of fully realized imaginary world, dense with complexity and layers of meaning. The spatial reasoning required to get involved in Grand Theft Auto humbles the spatial reasoning of an architect like Palladio. The Facebook generation has, in fact, got to deal with a dizzying array of options. And I think, in comparison, to be perfectly honest, the Royal Academy summer show seems tragically understimulating in comparison. Meanwhile, art, if art is understood as the activity which newspapers review, has itself leapt, the species barrier to become not the primary expression of visual awareness, but rather a new financial asset class. And this leaves us, recently with the extremely unedifying spectacle of Damien Hirst shorting the market and offloading $200 million worth of middlebrow crapola on rich but clueless rubes. And, I think it's interesting that Charles Saatchi's own forthcoming book on the subject uses the word artoholic in the title, suggesting that this form of art as a new financial asset class, is something to do with dependency and debasement. And Saatchi, much as I admire him and his achievements, and I genuinely do, we've got to remember that Charles Saatchi is as much concerned with market-making, image manipulation and branding as he is with connoisseurship or aesthetics, let alone, the meaning of art. But as I said, maybe our question is not about art appreciation or art practice, but about the business of actually teaching creativity. Where do ideas come from? And I have to say that when it comes to creativity, this is the real deal breaker where education is involved. Creativity absolutely cannot be taught. I love it. Creativity is by definition perverse. I love that thing Miles Davis said. Somebody asked Miles Davis to explain his creative method, and he says, well, I don't play what's there, I play what's not there. You can't sort of teach that sort of thing. Only the most unimaginative McKinseyite management consultant would think creativity could be measured and managed or taught. The whole point is surely that creativity is beyond legislation and organisation and method. It's about theft, not about negotiation. It's about anarchy, not about the curriculum. I love what Henry James once said about it. He said, we work in the dark, we do what we can, we give what we have. Our doubt is our passion, and our passion is our task. The rest is the madness of art. Of course, you cannot teach madness, nor would it be sane to try. And anyway, the Facebook generation doesn't, I believe, need it. And as a last thought, I'm sort of more impassioned about new technologies than the other speakers, I think. Some of them have questioned the value and the content and the force of the digital age. I just leave you with a final thought from a famous Dutch computer engineer who said, asking whether machines can think is about as sensible as asking if a submarine can swim. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Antony, can I ask you to take up some of the points that Stephen made, because you spoke as though perhaps he might have understood you to despise the Facebook generation, and I know you like technology, but you did suggest that there was a thirst for a deeper experience that I understood would not be available via the digital world.
I absolutely love the development of tools that has happened. I mean, that's, in a sense, the history of material culture is a history of the way that the body has been extended and perhaps been better calibrated in its relationship with the mind through technology. I think the issue for me is how you pull things out of the algorithms of digital thinking and make them work for you in the palpable world. And certainly, my work over the last 5 years has changed enormously because of computing power. I couldn't have made Quantum Cloud. I don't know if you know that piece, but I think it's better than The Angel of the North, and it's a deconstructed monument, you might say, but it stands next to the Millennium Dome. You probably don't go there very often, but it's in the river, and it's made of about 3,000 elements that are, well, none of them cohere together in any orthogonal or classically readable way. The only way of conceiving